Hey guys! Part 5 of What If Naruto Lives in a Post-Apocalyptic World. Naruto was not prepared for it. No one was. No one was prepared for the great rock which fell from the heavens. When it crashed into the earth, the countdown had begun. The countdown to the end of the world. Having beaten Sabaku no Gaara, Naruto would wake up and find that the world he knew, the world of Shinobi, had passed away. Now he had to survive this world. Hit like and subscribe if you like this one, and also please check the author in the description. Let's start. Chapter 9. Naruto, Kurenai, and Kosuke stared at the ceiling, frozen. Their flashlights moved from right to left over the massive pulsing green sacks filled with some type of oozing liquid. Yet, what horrified them more than that was what was inside those green sacks. They saw hundreds of men and women disgustingly bunched up together. Their faces and mouths leaked out of open slots that seemed designed to allow for open air. When the Kyuubi Jinchuriki placed a flashlight over one of the people, he noticed they had even greener eyes than the 6 shinobi trapped on the ground. Suddenly, they groaned angrily with the flashlight in their face. Curiously, Naruto took the light off their face. They then stopped groaning. He placed it back on their face. They groaned even angrier. Understanding the situation, Naruto removed his flashlight. They're sensitive to light, Kosuke said, having observed what the blonde did. Kurenai removed her flashlight from their eyes as well. What did this to them? Kurenai asked, horrified by what she saw. Inside each sack, some type of liquid sloshed around. Due to the transparency of the green pouches, the humans, if you could even call them that anymore, had wide bloated stomachs. Their eyes twitched. Their muscles spasmed. A fluorescent, green sticky substance trailed off the sides of their mouths. Their faces bulged to an even greater degree than the ones on the ground in front of them. In fact, it looked like they'd burst any second. Soon, the Genjutsu mistress found the answer to her question when they heard a gurgling sound. From out of the ceiling's darkness, 5 black legs, almost like those of a spider, came down. Yet, if those were supposed to be spiders' legs, then something was horribly wrong. On the ends of those giant legs, about 20 to 30 human arms wriggled. On the palm of each hand, there was an eye with black irises and red pupils. The black legs opened the mouths of about 10 humans. Like some type of feeding tube, it pushed open their throats and shoved some unseen substance down into their stomachs. The green sacks bloated even more. The citizens of the Fire Daimyo's palace groaned as their stomachs expanded, some so large they actually broke the sack a little bit. Once the legs were done injecting the substance into the bodies, they clacked and clattered a moment. Then, they withdrew back into the darkness even further up the ceiling. Unfortunately, Team KNK couldn't see what was up there. They feared disturbing the corrupted people trapped in their pouches. The room remained quiet once again. Turn off your flashlights, Naruto ordered. Kurenai and Kosuke did so. He then slowly walked back, pushing them with him as they did so. They muted their headsets, and they all walked out of the room. The doors were blown off so they couldn't close them. To be honest, they didn't really try. They just wanted to get as far away from the daimyo's palace as they could. They made it to the bottom of the steps. As soon as they did, they heard noise. Creak! Something screamed from the upper floors they were just on. However, they didn't panic. Instead, they found a vacant room and hid there quietly. For the next 4 or 5 minutes, they waited with bated breaths. While they waited, the silence was utter hell. Naruto quietly moved to the door and placed his ear to it. The palace was just as quiet as it had been when they entered. He grabbed the door handle and opened it. The hallways were dark as always. The only sound was the wind outside the shattered windows. He motioned for the others to follow him. They all re-entered the hallway. It took some time, but they made it back to the main palace area and stepped outside. The hot sun and sand-blown wind hit their faces. Kurenai felt her legs go weak as she sat on the steps. She placed her head in her hands. Even the eternal genin looked down at the ground hopelessly. Naruto looked at them and sighed. Last night's awkwardness aside, he wasn't the type to just not help those close to him if he could help it. He didn't know why he dealt with what he saw easier than they did. Maybe his initial shock had been dealt with back in Konoha. Whether it was the beast in the Chunin exam stadium, or the bone crawlers in the Shinobi district, he'd gotten used to the horrors this new world could provide. Of course, that didn't mean the image he saw wasn't burned into his mind. Naruto sighed and turned on his headset. Come in. Team KNK. Do you copy? The frantic voice of Ayam called over the line, her voice a welcome change from how the three felt. The Kyuubi Jinchuriki tapped his headset. I am Nichin, he called from his side. He heard a heavy sigh of relief. Naruto-kun? Thank God. Are you alright? Where are Kurenai-san and Kosuke-san? She asked. The blonde looked back at his team. They looked very demoralized. Perhaps he shouldn't have been surprised. Aside from the sand dwellers, this was probably their first time coming into contact with the true horrors of this new world. We're fine, I am Nichin. Look, where are Shino and Tenten? He asked. We're here. Naruto, what happened? We tried to contact you but the line went dead. Shino answered this time. Though relieved to hear their voices, Naruto didn't feel like answering that question. Instead, he stared back at the Fire Daimyo's palace. He stared at what it had become. His face scrunched up in frustration. We ran into a problem, Shino. A big problem, Databeo. Go back inside and pack our things. We're gonna figure out our next move, he replied. There was silence on the line for a moment, but Shino answered in time. Understood. We'll see you back here, he replied before the line went dead. Naruto took his headset off. When he turned his head, he saw Kurenai and Kosuke ready to go. The adults tried to appear strong, but it was clear they'd been dispirited. The Kyuubi Jinchuriki wasn't any different. They left without another word. After an hour or so, Naruto, Kurenai, and Kosuke finally made it back to Shino, Tenten, and Ayam. The latter three noticed how tired, worried, and terrified the others were. They guided them inside. They closed the doors and everyone entered the meeting room. The Genjutsu mistress and Eternal Genin took their seats around the table while Naruto leaned against the wall. He dropped his bag and slid to the floor, his head in his hands. Once again, the silence weighed on them all. It got to such a point that Tenten couldn't take it anymore. All right, what happened to you guys? You've been dead silent for the last 10 minutes. It's creeping me out, she exclaimed, which made the three glance at each other. The palace was also overrun with some type of monster. It captured all the citizens of the city. They've got green eggs nesting in their skin. Some were laid on the ground, others were stitched to the ceiling in some kind of green sacks of fluid. Something's ingesting them with stuff that's making their stomach morbidly fat. They've got green eyes and they're sensitive to light. We just left. That's probably why no one's here, Naruto said. Ayam stood horrified at the news while Tenten and Shino frowned. The former clenched her fists so hard they bled. Fuck! Tenten screamed as she kicked a chair into the wall so hard it broke into pieces. She then fell to her knees. Her hands covered her face. What are we gonna do? Konoha's not safe. The Fire Daimyo's city isn't safe. What if we're the only ones left? What's gonna happen to us? Tenten asked, though no one had an answer to give her. Finally, Naruto drew their attention to him. Forget it. We've done enough. Just take some time to relax. I'm gonna go scout ahead. We'll plan our next move, Databeo, he said. I'll go with you. I could use the fresh air anyway, Ayam stated rather quickly. Naruto would have argued, but he wasn't in the mood. Instead, he just told her that he'd be leaving in 10 to 15 minutes. The ramen waitress agreed and claimed she would be ready. With that, everyone moved out of the meeting room and conducted their own activities. Shino offered to remain on the headset for Naruto and Ayam. With a quick change of clothes, some water, and a lunch, Naruto and Ayam were ready to go. They walked out of the abandoned apartment complex and back into the blistering heat. The latter offered the former one wireless earbud. Confused, he placed it in his ear. She placed the other one in her ear, despite how they felt a jazzy tune played on a music player. The Ikararu waitress had charged it from the electricity still in the apartment. The singers started their lyrics while Ayam smiled. "I think a mood brightener would be good for us," she said, a little unsure of herself. Naruto heard the nervousness in her voice and tried to use the music to take his mind off things. "It's nice, Databeo," he replied. Ayam agreed before they began their looting adventure. The duo gave the daimyo's palace a wide berth while they searched through the other buildings around the area. Ayam grunted as she lifted up a large plank of wood. She threw it to the side and stepped into one of the buildings while Naruto searched the other. Neither found too many things of significance. Naruto found some plates, some bars of soap, mouthwash, handwash, and other cleaning supplies. Ayam found a few unloaded bags of food. She must have entered a market of some kind. Though money had no value right now, Ayam took it anyway. Was she allowed to dream? Dream that maybe one day she might get to rebuild her father's restaurant with all the money she'd procured? Maybe even continue serving ramen to her favorite customer? Hell, maybe they'd even run the shop together. Suddenly, Ayam shook her head. "Whoa, what am I talking about? I think the heat's getting to me," she thought before she continued to search through some shelves. The music in the earbuds changed to a different tune. Meanwhile, Naruto sealed up some other supplies. He grabbed some old towels, paper towels, napkins, toilet paper, and a couple of clothes from nearby houses. One of them actually was a profit because he found a bunch of armors. It was probably meant for warriors to wear who protected the palace. They were a little old, and the beginnings of rust began to appear on them, but he took them anyway. Pieces of armor were never bad things to have. When the two returned, Naruto sealed up Ayam's provisions in another scroll. He marked it, and soon they were on their way. The latter tried to say something to the former, but he turned around too fast. She closed her mouth and sadly sighed before they continued their walk. As the sun slowly began to make its rotation to sunset, the two finished up another 6 or 7 houses. Pickings started to get slim. Through that time Ayam tried to strike up some kind of conversation with her young friend, but he only offered her one-word answers or grunts. Finally, it got to the point where the pain was just too much. "Naruto-kun!" Ayam called out over the windy weather. The Kyuubi Jinchuriki stopped and faced her. He shivered when he saw the anguish on her face. Somehow, he could just tell what was coming. He had a feeling he knew what Ayam was up to when she kept trying to talk to him. He wasn't sure how he was supposed to reply or answer her. Last night still remained fresh in his mind. It must have laid fresh in all of their minds. Ayam sighed. Her friends always told her she was the type who always had something to say, but right now, her mouth didn't work. She knew what she wanted to say, but she wasn't sure how to say it. She couldn't continue to live like this. Last night had been one of the worst nights of her life. She'd woken up covered in sweat, her heart racing, and her vision blurry. She nearly stumbled just trying to get a drink of water. It wasn't the same without Naruto with her. She found comfort when he lay next to her, embarrassing times and all. The nightmares didn't cease. No matter how often she tried to sleep, they plagued her. Images of what her father must have gone through, what she went through, too many horrors her mind thought of that might drive her insane, she could handle them. She needed Naruto back. Yet, that wasn't the only reason. She missed him as her friend. She saw the loneliness and fear in his eyes. It was no different from the time when he ran away from them when her father saw him out in the rain. She didn't know why, but his pain made her heart twist. Without so much as a thought, Ayam ran to him and hugged him as tight as she could. The Kyuubi Jinchuriki's eyes widened. "I'm not afraid of you, Naruto-kun. No matter what strange abilities you develop, I'll never be scared of you. You saved my life. You've kept us all safe. None of us could have made it this far without you. When you saved me, you are my hero. I don't care what anyone else does, I'll always be by your side," she said as she held him. The former genin sighed. "Maybe you're all right to be scared of me, Ayam Nichin. I have no idea what's happening to me. You know, I think all that stuff about fate is stupid, but since yesterday I've just wondered, maybe I'm just not destined to be normal. Maybe I don't get to be like everyone else. he said, his melancholy state speaking to Ayam. The young woman brushed her hands through his hair. Well, I don't want you to be like everyone else, Naruto-kun. Look at what you've done. Anyone else might have given up, but because of you, we've survived for this long. I can't speak for everyone else, but I don't think we could have gotten far with anyone else. You're our leader, Naruto-kun. A leader can't just be like everyone else. They're special. Ayam answered. Naruto closed his eyes. He tried to keep the smile off his face, but it was very hard. Ayam's sincere words in this dying world were a great privilege to have. Very rarely had he ever been recognized or called special. Sasuke graduated top of the class, Naruto barely got to graduate at all. Many didn't know this, but aspiring academy students often got sponsors who could aid in paying for their education. This was done to promote aspiring shinobi in the world of their careers. In exchange, though the shinobi didn't have to, it was polite to promote the products of the businesses and people who supported them. Usually, clan children got the most sponsors. Their extended families, and their families' business partners, promoted them. Needless to say, but Uchiha Sasuke definitely got the most sponsors. Not only was he the best in the academy, but he was also the heir to the prestigious Uchiha clan. The business opportunities were immeasurable. Naruto didn't know how many sponsors Sasuke actually received, but he did know the Uchiha definitely had the most with 50. Hell, Sasuke's entire education was completely paid for. Now, those were 50 sponsors he accepted. Some speculated the Uchiha actually got more than 200 offer letters. With all those offers, Sasuke never had to spend his stipend on anything. He could just save, and save, and save until he did whatever he wanted. Dare anyone guess how many sponsors Naruto got? Well, officially, he'd have to one. Ayam and Tucci actually sponsored him during his time as an academy student. It wasn't a lot of money, but they helped him pay for some materials he needed. Tucci always claimed that it'd do well for business if the future Hokage frequented Ichiraku ramen. Of course, Naruto loved ramen, but that was also why he praised them both so much. He tried hard to bring them business for promoting him. Now, unofficially, or illegally, Naruto had about 10 sponsors. To survive from one day to the next, he took a lot of unsavory jobs, some of which he really wasn't proud of. Local drug trafficking, aiding in money laundering, promoting contact between mobsters, sweeping and cleaning safe houses, helping lords and bosses escape Konoha authorities, yeah. Naruto had a rather extensive criminal history list. Anyway, all of those jobs netted him some anonymous checks, helped him pay for his school's supplies. Those checks kept coming so long as he did his work. Of course, none of his employers were nice. There'd never be an opportunity to talk badly of him. Where the civilians in the village spoke behind his back, they openly mocked him. He could only grit his teeth and bear it, all for the better life he wished he had. Never had he been praised. Never had he been acknowledged as a special person. All his hard work was only met with criticism, a constant reminder that no matter how hard he tried, life always seemed to fuck with him. Truth be told, Naruto might have actually become insane if it was for Tucci, Ayam, and Irika Yumino. Sure, Irika did start being strict in the blonde's training, but it was only near the end of his academic career was he praised by his sensei for it. Now that Ayam hugged him, he remembered that the father-daughter ramen owners always praised him. Not one strict or criticizing remark fell from their lips. There was always recognition. Sure, they couldn't give it all the time, but they didn't need to. All he ever wanted was just a little bit. Just a little praise, respect, and affection. How funny that it might take the end of the world to give that to him. Thank you, I am Nichin. Naruto softly. That was a thank you from years of grief, struggles, and hard work. Ayam slowly nodded and continued to hug him for some time until they parted. Naruto thought on his friend's words before his eyes widened. He turned back to the Fire Daimyo's palace. As he did, his eyes grew wider. To help him process his thoughts faster, he pushed some green chakra into his mind. He remembered a few lessons in geography and social studies about the Fire Daimyo's palace. In the images on his textbooks, he remembered seeing a particular picture of the daimyo's palace. To most, it would be unassuming, worthless even. However, the longer he thought, the longer it made sense. I am Nichin! Naruto exclaimed happily, much to the ramen's waitress' surprise. I could kiss you! W-wa! I am, gasped as Naruto hugged her tight. He then grabbed her arm and they ran back to the apartment. As soon as they ran back home, Naruto rushed himself and I am up the stairs. They entered the meeting room. I am Nichin, go gather everyone. We might be leaving the city, but it might not be through sand anymore, the blonde said as he grabbed the map of the city he'd gotten yesterday. While I am moved to get everyone together, Naruto crossed his fingers. Kage Bunshin no Jutsu, Naruto called out. A clone appeared. No words needed to be exchanged between them. The clone opened the window and jumped out of the window towards the palace. Meanwhile, when Naruto opened the map, he already started looking around the palace grounds on the map. He stared in the northeast of the city. His smile widened. Pretty soon, I.M. opened the door and everyone followed behind her inside. Alright, what's got you so excited that I.M.-san had to pull me away from my book? Tenten asked. Everyone took their seats. Kurenai and Kosuke still seemed a little affected by what they saw, but the grin on Naruto's face made them curious. Hell, it was kind of infectious. Before we get to that, Kosuke-san, you said you've been to the Fire Daimyo's palace before, right? Naruto asked. Surprised to have his name called, the Eternal Genin noticed a map on the table. Indeed. I've had the honor of going there many times in my career as a shinobi. Why do you ask? The elderly man asked. Everyone, look at this. He pointed at the map. Everyone stared at the spot he pointed on. It was a spot on the map next to the palace. What about it? Kurenai asked, but Kosuke gasped. Understanding filled his mind. He stared at Naruto in shock. Impossible. How could a young man like him even know that? Even Kosuke had forgotten about it. It was back during the time of the Night-Aim Hokage. That ancient passageway. I am Nichin suddenly gave me a good idea. No, it might be the best idea to come out of this situation, Databayo, he exclaimed. Everyone aside from Kosuke looked at their leader strangely, but the blonde quickly eased their concerns. Shino, Tenten, do you guys remember when the academy taught us about the history of the Land of Fire? He asked. Yes? Tenten questioned. She did remember a little bit, but not all of it. History was one of her worst subjects unless it came to war stories of amazing weapons. I believe so, Shino answered as well. There once was a time when the Fire Daimyo's palace was sieged upon during the First Great Shinobi War. The siege was made from a joint effort of KyuubiGoku and a few minor villages. They wanted to take the daimyo to force a Konoha surrender. Konoha would then be annexed into Kumo, he said. Everyone stared at Naruto like they'd never seen him before in their lives. His story pulled them all in as he started penciling from their base to the palace. The siege was unsuccessful because the daimyo wasn't found in the palace. It was rumored that one of the field workers, loyal to the daimyo, built a fountain well in the daimyo's garden. When the palace was being sieged, the worker helped the daimyo escape into the well. That well led to an underground cavern with a ship that sailed to the east to an island called Yuzushiogaku, Naruto said. Kosuke felt a bead of sweat fall down his face. His relief suddenly gave way to worry. The Eternal Genin knew of Yuzushiogaku. He also knew of the people who resided there, such as the Yondaime Hokage's wife. He sighed. Suddenly, this sounded like a bad idea, but he couldn't exactly find a reason to damp the enthusiasm moving through the room. Yuzushiogaku, was that in our textbooks? If it was, then it must have only been brief. So you think there was a secret tunnel for the daimyo in case of emergency? Tenten remarked while Naruto nodded. Kurenai looked over the map. It does make sense. Look at this map. To the northeast of the Fire Daimyo city, there's a straight line to the sea, but we don't know if that ship's even still there. More than that, does anyone even know how to steer a ship? She asked. Everyone stayed silent for a moment. Mariboshi clenched his fists. I know how, the man said with a pleasant smile that he didn't exactly feel. You do? Tenten asked. Kosuke laughed. I've sailed a few ships in my time. I can get us where we need to go, he replied. He hoped he sounded as convincing as he hoped. He was still very worried. Though Konoha might not exist anymore, there were still many secrets she'd never disclosed, especially to a certain Jinchuriki. We still don't know if it still works. The tunnel could have collapsed, Shino said. Naruto closed his eyes for a moment. He then opened them and grinned. It still works, he said, getting everyone's attention. The clone I sent to check just dispelled. It's still there. The statue it was under is broken, but it's there. The clone marked it, he said. Kurenai opened her mouth and then closed it, unsure of what to say next. Instead, Ayam spoke. Well, I'd rather we take Naruto-kun's route. I mean, think about it, we've been traveling through desert storms for weeks. The only thing we've seen are mountains of sand. At least if we try this method, then it's better than walking aimlessly. Plus, it might just be me, but at night in our tents, I sometimes hear the sand rumble. Ayam replied. She didn't need to say any more. Everyone else felt the same. At night they too, in the midst of their sleep, sometimes felt the sand rumble in strange ways. None of them felt at ease on land in many days. For the next few hours, the group planned about this new information. They discussed as many possibilities as they could, but no one could deny that it did sound like a good idea. The group asked for Naruto to make another clone and scout the tunnels. The blonde did as they wished. For the next 4 or 5 hours, the clone maneuvered through the maze of tunnels beneath the Fire City. As expected of an escape route, too many places led to dead ends or dangerous pit traps. During all this time, Naruto discovered something. He saw what the clone saw before it dispelled. It was like he roamed through the dank tunnels. Now that he thought about it, that was why he knew the tunnel was beneath the broken statue when the clone dispelled. He told Kurenai and Kosuke. Both nodded. They told him of another reason the Kage Bunshin was so feared. All the experience the clone felt would return to the user. Granted, that's what made it dangerous. An overdose of fatigue could kill a person if they weren't careful enough. After about 6 hours passed and the moon overtook the sun in the sky, the blonde smirked. Found it. Looks a little beat up, but I think we can use it, he said while everyone put their books down. And you didn't run into anything down there? Kurenai asked. Nope. I think I have it mapped out as well as I can get it. It's all whether you guys want to go down there now or in the morning, he answered. Would it matter? The tunnels are gonna be dark anyway. No offense, guys, but I wouldn't mind going now. This place feels like it'll fall any day now, Tenten remarked as she plugged in the group's headsets into the wall. Might as well get some more charging in before they departed. Come to think of it, do we even have a sea map? It's possible we could get lost, Ayam said. Naruto shook his head. The ship should have a map. It probably never leaves in case of emergency, he answered. His friend nodded. The room fell into silence for a moment or two before Shino spoke. I'm in favor of going as well. If there are enemies on the island, then it's not hard to clean them up. It's also fairly secure for the 6 of us. It's separated from the mainland. Though we don't know the full details of the place yet, for now I think it's a good idea, the Aburame heir said. Kurenai sighed as she looked back at the map. Well, it does sound more reasonable than aimlessly traveling. I'd prefer now to later. We don't know how the mutations in the palace will advance if we stay, she advised. Kosuke and Ayam gave their agreement to leave immediately as well. With that said, Naruto finally nodded. Alright, since we're all in agreement, then we'll prepare to leave. We're going to do this carefully. I'll be in the front and a clone will be in the back. The tunnels are gonna be dark, and unless we do that, I fear us getting separated. A lot of the traps the clone found were very elaborate. Let's be careful, Databayo, he claimed. Agreed, everyone said. Once the meeting was concluded, Naruto began sealing up everyone's supplies. He gave a few sets of kunai and shuriken to everyone. Ayam even got a set as she'd been quite diligent in her training. While she wouldn't be winning the highest marks in the academy, she was capable enough to fend for herself if she needed to. It took another hour, and it was close to midnight before everyone was ready and the base was cleared. They made sure everything was charged. They ate a brief dinner, and before long, everyone pulled up their cloaks and turned out the lights in the apartment. The last members of Konoha walked out of the apartment. The night air was very cold. The city looked so different in the darkness as compared to when the sun was out. Everyone made their way quietly towards the palace. The only sound was their steps as they did so. Just as they planned, Naruto took the lead with a clone behind the rest of them. A cold breeze blew layers of sand through the city. Broken wooden doors slammed between walls. The sound of drapes fluttered on another torn hotel complex. The group climbed over a pile of debris, careful not to disturb too much of the environment and risk waking what might be hidden. Naruto picked up Ayame and took her down to the other side over a large, crushed building that was most likely a lookout tower. The others followed behind him. The palace grew larger and larger. Like last time, they all entered through the entrance of the broken-down guard walls. Shino cursed when his foot stepped on a part of the iron that creaked. The others looked at him, but he wordlessly offered an apology. They continued moving. Around the palace and into its worn-down, sand-ridden gardens, they ushered themselves in. Naruto guided them to the spot where his clone marked. As they walked, each of them took in the grounds. Where there used to be lush green fields with plenty of flowers, they were now filled with tumbleweeds, dry, cracked earth, and fallen tree branches. A wasteland of death and destruction filled its wake. Not a single thing of beauty lay anywhere. Even the steps which led out to it were cracked and crumbled, ready to be broken apart like everything else against the arid weather. After 2 or 3 minutes, the group made it to the spot of the fallen statue. No one could tell what it was. The face had been broken and most likely crushed in the wind. Naruto picked up the rest of the statue, to the surprise of everyone. He motioned for them to go. Kurenai quickly moved forward and noticed there was indeed a well beneath the statue. She nodded to the others and they all climbed down the steps of the ladder. Their feet and hands clacked down as they did so. Naruto watched them go before he stiffened. He turned back to the palace. He saw nothing but dark windows and empty plains. His eyes narrowed. Something was watching them. He felt it. He didn't know what it was, but he certainly knew they caught something's attention. Unfortunately, it was too dark for him to tell. Anxious, he entered as well and dropped the statue down. As he slowly brought it down, just before he was cut off from the upper lands, he thought he saw something move in one of the windows, but he couldn't be sure. It looked like some type of flapping curtain. The statue covered the well. Thankfully, when the Naruto clone investigated earlier, it left the passage open. The climb to the bottom wasn't cramped because of this. Once, Naruto and his clone came down. He grabbed a flashlight and the map he marked with it. He glanced back at everyone else. They nodded. So began the team's trek through the tunnels beneath the Fire Daimyo's city. The tunnels howled ominously. No one still said a word, scared of what could lay in the darkness if they said even one peep. Despite it being dry on the surface, some of the group noted the sound of dripping water in the distance. Its odd echo sent a shiver down everyone's back. As they walked, they suddenly came up to a 3-way corridor. Naruto placed his flashlight on the map. He pointed to the left tunnel. Everyone followed him inside. As soon as they walked into the left tunnel, a sense of danger filled Naruto's mind. The young man turned around and stopped the group. He stared at the entrance of the left tunnel they just went down. He channeled some green chakra to his ear and placed his head on the ground. Through the natural cavern ambience, the blonde frowned when he heard something moving, something heavy, something, from above the tunnels. It sounded a lot like stone. A cultivated stone like a statue. Kurenai and Kosuke saw the unease in Naruto's eyes. They were being followed. They didn't know by what, but he signaled that something moved the statue. He heard something groaning as it climbed down the ladder. Something large, unnaturally inhuman, and snarling like a ravenous beast. The Kyuubi Jinchuriki and Tenten ran back into the main room they just left. Naruto placed 5 explosion tags on the walls of the opposite exit they left from. The weapons mistress placed a tripwire down. The two then ran back to their group. They continued down the pathway. 1 hour passed. 2 hours passed. At some point, the group actually wondered if maybe Naruto was just being paranoid, which they couldn't fault. After all, paranoia kept a shinobi alive. However, fear rushed through everyone when they heard a massive explosion further up in the caves where they'd been a few hours ago. They stared in shock as the cave rumbled. A few sharp stones fell over the group as the tunnels rumbled angrily. Once the shaking stopped, the group decided to quicken their pace. They made a left turn, then a right, then another right, then they rushed down the center of a four-way cavern. Each time they trapped the area, but they never broke their formation. The clone always stayed at the back while the real Naruto remained at the front. After so many twists, turns, and seemingly aimless walking, Naruto smelled the scent of underground water. Through one more passageway, the group finally made it to the cove beneath the city. A large stretch of water led to the outside worth via a waterway. Docked near the rocky shore was a small boat. Of course, the boat couldn't look extravagant. It was meant to get someone away inconspicuously. However, not only did it look seaworthy, but it also looked well maintained. A few steps led down to it. "Let's secure the area, Databao," Naruto said. "Right. Shino, Tenten, check the ship. I am and Kosuke will take the backpacks to the ship. Naruto, I want to check the outer lane of the tunnels. If we're still being followed, we might have to set sail immediately," Kurenai suggested. The Uzumaki heir agreed. "Yeah. Let's do that. There's a breeze blowing through the cavern so it could carry the ship into the open sea. I don't know how far the cave's gonna go until we head out into the sea considering we couldn't notice any water for miles," he remarked. Everyone agreed. Tenten and Shino inspected the ship while Naruto and Kurenai journeyed about 10 minutes back the way they came. They checked the perimeter. The tunnels were actually kind of cold considering they'd been in hot desert weather just a few hours ago. The Genjutsu mistress watched the young genin place his ear to the ground. He heard no more snarling, nor any footsteps. Everything seemed quiet. If they were lucky, then the explosions they set up could have walled off their section of the caves. Maybe whatever tailed them was gone. After a half-hour check, Kurenai and Naruto gave the all clear and headed back to the ship. They found their friends sitting near it, all the backpacks secured on the boat. Exhausted, they all sighed and sat down. The Kyuubi Jinchuriki unsealed some drapes they stole and lit them on fire on the rocky ground. Everyone gathered around the fire and warmed themselves. Tenten stared at the flames and sighed. "I used to always tell Lee and Guy-sensei to stop their stupid antics. It was always training with them. Lee wanted to be a great shinobi in taijutsu even though he had no talent in ninjutsu or genjutsu. Then, there was Guy-sensei on and on about youth, and whatnot. Back then, I'd have given anything for them to stop. Now, I'd give almost anything to hear their voices again," she replied sadly as she pulled her knees to her chest. "I think I know what you mean. Back on Team 7, Sakura always talked about Sasuke. Sasuke. I tell you, I actually thought there was some kind of Sasuke cult in the academy between all the girls," Naruto replied. Tenten snorted. "Not my type if you asked me," she replied. "I do believe you'd be in the minority then," Shino replied, which got everyone to chuckle. Kosuke then turned to Kurenai. "Speaking of romances, I heard there was something between a certain Kunoichi and Asuma-san. Any tales on that, Kurenai-san?" the Eternal Genin asked. Kurenai gawked and suddenly felt rather small when all eyes were on her. She turned her head to the side. There was nothing going on between Asuma and myself. He did try once though. Asked me for a cup of coffee, at 4 in the morning. Not the smoothest invitation, but I didn't turn him down," she replied. She wouldn't lie, there probably could have been something if they continued. During the Chunin exam, before the invasion started, he'd, not so subtly, asked her to dinner. She accepted since she figured she wasn't doing anything at the time. Now, well, she'd probably be waiting for the dinner date for a long time. The group shared stories for a little while. Shino told Naruto of Hinata's crush on him, which absolutely floored him completely. Unfortunately, it wasn't as filled with humor as they all liked. It seemed utterly inconceivable to Naruto that any girl might find him attractive. So starved for attention and validation, he failed to properly register any of it. Granted, Hinata wasn't the most forward person in that regard. When asked why he liked Sakura, Naruto told a story of how the pink-haired girl actually stood up for him once. It was over something stupid, but it had been one of the few times anyone did so. Maybe that's when it started. Of course, she could be a bit of a jerk sometimes. Sakura, he felt, still had a nice heart, occasionally. Ayame spoke of her times in trade school, hoping to inherit Ichiraku ramen from her father. She spoke of some funny times with her friends while Kosuke offered up the tale of why he became known as the Eternal Genin. Despite the sad tale, Naruto remained stunned that the man served under 3 Kage. He'd clearly underestimated the man. Slowly, the stories died down. Everyone turned out the fire and fell asleep, the traps in place should anything interfere. That night, Ayame and Naruto slept together again, both thoroughly relaxed. The next morning, or what the group assumed was morning, they quickly prepared the ship one more time. They inspected their surroundings and had a very quick lunch. When Naruto checked out the caverns, he didn't hear anything. He checked the traps. He checked the ceiling. Everything seemed all ready, so he collected the traps since they could be used later. But why was he so worried? The former genin walked back to his group. Had he checked all the way back to the crossway the group found when they first climbed down the ladder, he would have seen a grotesque sight. A woman lined with green ooze and pus died in a corner. The egg that laid in her eye socket cracked. A tiny screech roared through the open caverns. The woman's mouth so wide her jaw cracked. 5 hairy limbs like those of a spider blasted out. She coughed as she spat the green liquid from her mouth. As it fell to the ground, it slowly began to spread over the cavern walls. The woman's eyes rolled into the back of her head. Meanwhile, Naruto, Tenten, and Shino released the sails on the ship. Kosuke took the helm. "Ready to go?" Naruto asked. "Yeah," everyone announced. The wind through the tunnels pushed the sails as Kurenai and Ayame untied the lines that kept the ship tied down. As soon as they were done, they jumped onto the boat, and the last survivors from Konoha watched their camp for the night slowly disappear. The sound of the cavern's water splashing against the bottom of the ship. The walls moved back like something out of a dark amusement park. The others kept their flashlights on so that they could help Kosuke navigate through the rocks, stalagmites, and stalactites. Clearly, the group of 6 underestimated just how much of the tunnel they had or hadn't explored. It took them at least 4 hours of underground sailing before they found some semblance of light. In those 4 hours, Kurenai took some time to try and teach Naruto, Shino, Tenten, and Ayame a few things about elemental ninjutsu. For once, Naruto had no choice but to stand still and listen. That said, he absorbed all he learned from her wisdom. He wondered why. It all seemed so easy to understand. Why was his time in the academy this easy? In fact, Naruto created a clone to practice all Kurenai taught since he was a little busy at the moment. That said, through this practice, the Genjutsu mistress also taught him chakra control. Indeed, it always came back down to the basics and mundane practices. The former Jonin tore a piece of paper and handed it to him. He could practice his chakra control while his clone worked in its elemental training. He sighed as he tried to keep the piece of paper stuck to his head. Clearly, even in the apocalypse, Naruto couldn't escape academic lessons. After the 4 hours of mundane navigation and shinobi lessons passed, the semblance of light that the group saw was actually the cave's entrance. "Ugh, finally," Tenten said as she turned off her flashlight. "Don't lower your guard, Databale. We've only seen land creatures. I don't think we've ever seen sea ones," the blonde said, which made the weapons mistress gulp. While Kosuke manned the ship, the others looked over the water, but it was too murky to tell what was there. As far as Naruto knew, there didn't seem to be any threats. The ship just sailed out the cavern entrance without incident. The group wished they could see the sun on the day, but all that greeted them was putrid green clouds, dusty arid, and the horrid smell of dead, rotting fish. Naruto took out a map from the ship's interior. On it was marked the route to head to Uzushiogakure. It was a bit old, but it was probably only ever used in case of emergencies. With that being the case, Naruto took a more updated map and placed it next to the old one. "So we should arrive at Uzushio by sea in 4 or 5 days, 3 if the winds keep in our favor. Are you sure no one else is there?" Naruto asked. "As far as I'm aware," It's been isolated for many years, Kosuke said, though Kurenai noticed the hesitation in his voice. There was an odd crack there that shouldn't have been. She frowned. Naruto rolled up the map. Fine, then that's our final destination. I am Michin. How do the supplies look? He asked. The former ramen waitress pulled out a notebook. We've still got plenty left, though there's an unbalanced ratio between the food and the water. I think we'll have to be careful of that, she answered. The blonde nodded and gave the eternal genin the go-ahead to proceed. The old man turned the wheel around and the group sailed to the east. As the ship sailed aimlessly through the sea, the group tried not to think about the lives lost when they saw a few capsized vessels with torn flags, broken decks, and rotted wood. For the group of survivors, 2 days went by very slowly. The days were spent going through more training and physical conditioning. While the ground couldn't use chakra, that didn't mean there weren't things Kurenai couldn't teach them in hand-to-hand combat. She critiqued Tenten, Shino, and Naruto equally like they were her own genin squad. Ayame took her own time to train when she could under Kosuke's guidance. The Kyuubi Jinchuriki diligently continued his chakra control exercise without complaint, much to the surprise of the former jonin. Based on his profile, Uzumaki Naruto always complained until someone had to goad him into learning. It seemed he really did mature in a lot of ways. Unfortunately, the blonde's attempts at performing any type of elemental jutsu proved unfruitful. To be honest, no one understood why. Hell, he made a clone easily enough. He even began walking on flat surfaces like the ship walls or even the flowing water when he could. At first, Tenten compared him to Lee, but Kurenai shook her head. Lee wasn't talented at ninjutsu or genjutsu. Clearly, Naruto could do jutsu now. Something was going on with him that they weren't getting. Then again, a lot of things involved him that the group didn't get. As the sun set on another day, Naruto and his group ate dinner. They all looked at each other and slowly nodded. The sea was calm as the moon rose into the sky. Everyone gathered into one room. Kurenai grabbed her kunai, and so did Kosuke. Shino, Tenten, and Ayame stood behind them while Naruto closed the door. He heard the tumblers lock, and he made his way up the stairs. So you knew from the start. You've gotten perceptive, Naruto. Sure you can take them down? Kyuubi asked. The Jinchuriki frowned as his steps echoed on the platform from below the deck to above. His ears could hear the sound of moving water. It wasn't the normal push and pull either. It was the sound of something parting the water, heading for their direction. They get one chance, he said, his green eyes piercing the darkness. He heard the sound of beating hearts over the sea. As he stood on the ship's deck, the blonde never thought this would be his first time coming into contact with other people. He'd dreamed about this before. He always thought he'd meet some other Konoha people, they'd all laugh over some warm soda, and… Naruto shook his head of his thoughts. He watched a few boats sail closer to his ship. Hooks landed on the wooden railing. His heart was calm. These people would either become one of two categories. They would either become part of his friend group, or they'd kneel like the rest. Quickly, Naruto ducked behind the wall that protected the helm's wheel. He heard the sound of footsteps. About 6 men. All of them were armed from the way he heard the slicing of blades. Hee, SSS Swan, SS Swan legs. Misi Swan legs. Beauty, beauty, beauty swan legs. FFX swan legs. PP pretty swan legs. BB better swan legs than others, one said, his tone rather misaligned and scummy. It was like the tone of some mad swindler. The blonde thought he heard this one roll his tongue like a rabid dog. Shut up. The last one we gave you, you fucking gutted her throat. That was our last one too. Now keep quiet. We didn't tail this ship for 2 days just so you could wake up everyone, another hissed. Orders, sir? The same one asked. Another footstep came, this one heavier than the rest. Kill the old man. We strip him for meat. Bind the 2 brats. Maybe we can find some use for them. They'll either bolster our numbers or they can get sold off when we find someone to give them to. I'll take the brunette and black-haired girls. Haven't had a good one in a couple days since Saz killed the last one. I'm gonna be the fucking king of these wastelands when we're through, he said. Naruto's green eyes shined a harsher grade. So, that was how it was going to be. He sat behind the helm's wall, smiling to himself. He sat there, contemplating things. Truth be told, he was angry. He was very angry. He was impossibly angry. He placed his hand on the ground. To take away what was already his? What God bless you men to be so bold as to take what was already his? The blonde channeled some chakra into the floor. He could feel each of their chakra signatures. Small, insignificant, worthless, just perfect for his needs. The blonde watched the green chakra eerily crawl along the ground. It wasn't long before it rose into the air and latched itself to the chakra of one of the intruders. He rubbed his head for a moment before Naruto spoke. His smile widened. Kill them! Kill them for me! Kill them, for your God! Yes, Lord Naruto. Thank you for granting me this holy task, the man said before he suddenly started cackling. Bastard! Be quiet! What are you cack? Burrug! The swipe of a blade. The crunch of broken bones. The splattering of blood on the deck. Naruto heard them all. He peered over his ledge and he watched the person he controlled attack his friends. Die! Die! All of you die for my God! Surrender your fucking bodies to him! His servant laughed as he jumped on top of someone and stabbed his blade into their chest. He violently ripped it from their torso, broken muscle tissue and spilled organs laid everywhere. Fugen, what the fuck is wrong with you? Have you lost your mind? Another snarled, but he had his head cut off from his shoulders. It rolled off the side of the ship and into the water. The man named Fugen snickered. Are you pleased, my lord? Watch me kill for you. Watch me make them submit to you. You're worthy. You're holy. You're my God, he exclaimed as Naruto nodded. Indeed. You do good work. Kill them all. Kill them all for me, Naruto said, his tone void of his usual jovial mirth. Instead, a cold, unforgiving wave of authority rushed through his body. His smile turned into a full grin. Humph, weaklings, you can't even take care of one guy, the captain of the group asked. Suddenly, Naruto felt his green chakra disconnect from Fugen as the man's head was bashed in by an iron club. His body fell to the floor. He sucked his teeth. Oh well, he'd have to make do. I told that shithead to stay off the booze. Now, it's just the three of us. You, me, and fucking insane Jizuken here. What do you want to do? The apparent second-in-command asked. We ain't leaving without our prizes. Don't worry. It's an old man, 3 kids, and 2 bitches. Nothing to be scared of, the captain replied. Almost immediately as the words left his mouth, they all heard clapping. Since there was no moon, it was pretty damn dark. The dusty clouds covered the sky once again. Neither sun nor moon could push through it. So I could only get 3 of you, Databale. You really caved his head in. Impressive strength for a gorilla. Naruto's voice echoed over the ship. He watched the men ready themselves for battle. The captain stood in front of his men while his right hand took out a bow. The one named Jizuken, who looked more like a dog with a human body, sniffed the air. Humph, so that was your doing. I thought it was fucking weird. Show yourself before I sink this damned ship. I've still got my boat. You don't, the captain replied. Oh, is that right? Well, I think you need arms to do that, Naruto replied. What the fuck do you? The captain suddenly felt a twinge of pain. The pain suddenly got stronger. Then came a harsh thud. The pain suddenly exploded on both the captain's shoulders. Sir, what's wrong? I can't see you in. The second-hand man suddenly stopped talking. His eyes rolled into the back of his head while his body collapsed on the ship. His head plopped into the sea below. FFUCK. Jizuken. Don't just stand there. Do something, you, or the only thing you're fucking is a wooden spear up your ass, the captain growled. The captain heard nothing. There was naught but darkness and silence. Jizuken! Answer me! The captain thundered. He groaned as the pain filled his body. He felt like writhing in utter agony. The searing torture he felt was enough to make him pass out. Oh right, that guy. Give me a moment, Naruto said. Suddenly, as if a veil had come off the captain's eyes, he stared straight at his servant Jizuken's head on a piece of splintered wood, staring right back at him. He then became aware of the pain in his arms. When he looked at both his sides, he realized he had no arms. One laid on wooden floor to his right. The other, its fingers wrapping around his trusty mace, laid on his left. AHH. Before the captain could scream, a hand came over his mouth. I didn't permit you to speak, wretch. Don't know what type of beasts are out there. Can't have you alerting them all, the young blonde said as the captain stared into his oddly hypnotic eyes. The Kyuubi Jinchuriki's grip got tighter. The captain groaned as the boy's sharp nails dug into his skull. Tell me, what's your name? Naruto asked. Captain, go fuck yourself. Aua rough. The man groaned as Naruto raised his foot and crushed the man's right kneecap. He wanted to double over in pain, but he couldn't summon the strength. Try again. See Captain burn in fucking Hiawaga! He cried as Naruto busted the left kneecap. Third time's the charm. Shall I find out what else I can break? The green-eyed boy asked. Spit and saliva fell from the captain's mouth while his bloody teeth fell out and onto the porch. Doran, he growled. This was ridiculous. His instincts were going haywire. How had it all gone so wrong? He'd killed and captured so many people after the elemental nations went to shit. For so long, he'd been at the top. He'd been scared of nobody. He was a B-rank bounty. So why was he fucking scared of a little boy? Why had this boy overpowered him so easily? Why did he feel the desire to bow his head to the ground and repent to the blonde for what he'd done? Naruto nodded. Very good. Now let me give you a little piece of information, he said as he dragged the captain to the side of the boat. Then, with impressive strength, the young man held the large pirate over the water. The man's neck snapped as the weight of his body swung fruitlessly. TOSETWO ... he said, his voice a distorted growl of a voice that could give Dora nightmares before Naruto slowly lowered him into the water. The captain squirmed and wiggled for air, but he could not escape. As the air left his lungs, he slowly and painfully left the destroyed world that the elemental nations had turned into. Naruto held the body under the water for 10 minutes before he released it. He then dipped his hands into the sea and washed the blood off. Once he was clean, he removed everything from the deck and then stood out, staring at the sea. The green glow in his eyes faded. Huh! What happened? Naruto said as he surveyed some of the destroyed deck. It happened again. Did he pass out? He remembered hearing those words that made him angry until this happened. Did he black out again? Kyuubi, what happened to me? Naruto asked. Unfortunately, the great demon had no answers. I don't know. I couldn't see. It was like I was cut off from you before the fight happened, but it looks like you won regardless, the Kyuubi replied. Did Naruto win? He felt like he didn't even do anything. Worried, but not sure what to do about it, Naruto noticed the giant, spiked mace on the ground. He grabbed a hold of it and lifted it up easily. As he stared at it, he frowned. So, even with the end of the world, people couldn't work together. Was Naruto expecting something different? Well, no, but he hoped he was proved wrong. Perhaps in all his life he'd come to learn that reality was often disappointing. Well, fine. At least that let him know what he was working with. Protect his own group. That was all that mattered. That was the type of world this was. A lawless, unforgiving, brutal land where the briefest hesitation meant the death of not just him, but his friends. The grim fate of those too weak to survive in this world was made known to him. If he didn't measure up, wise up, what would befall Iam and Kurenai? What would befall the others? He walked below deck and down a few flights of stairs. He returned to the group's bedroom. He knocked on the door 5, then 3, then 15 times. He opened the door and found his group waiting for him. They all eased when they saw his face. Offering for you, 10-10, he claimed as he held up the large mace he looted. The weapon user's eyes sparkled before she sped to the other side of the room. She firmly hugged Naruto before she took hold of the mace. The blonde blinked, She was stronger than he thought. Awesome! She exclaimed as she sat on her sleeping bag and inspected her newest gift. Meanwhile, Ayam quickly hugged Naruto while he gave them the rundown of what happened. He decided not to tell them what the men had in store for them, but he was sure Kurenai could figure it out on her own. Indeed, as it always seemed, the worst terrors in this world weren't the beasts of the landscape. I think we should sail a bit further from here just in case of reinforcements. Naruto may have killed their leader, but I doubt they don't have more. At least we know who it was that killed all those boats back near the Fire Country Cave, Shino said. I agree. I'd rather not sleep here, Kurenai spoke. Kosuke silently agreed. As usual, everyone's gaze turned to Naruto, their leader. He took in their gazes and sighed. Take us out of here, Kosuke-san, he said. Will do, the Eternal Genin said as everyone walked above deck. Naruto and Shino lifted up the anchor while Kurenai and Ayam released the sails. Kosuke quickly turned the wheel and soon the ship was off. The group watched the small boats get left behind until they disappeared. After that incident, 2 more days passed before Tenten shouted, Land ho, mateys! Everyone laughed at her as they stared at what seemed like a massive forested island covered in a thick, dark yellowish fog. The 6 members could see a large swirling symbol on top of a broken dock, just like the swirl symbol on the back of a Konoha Shinobi flak jacket. Did we make it? Ayam asked. Yeah, they made it. Kosuke knew they made it. He'd been here before after all. Yup, this is it. Welcome to Yuzushiogakure, the land of eddies, he said as he pulled the ship into docks. As Naruto and everyone disembarked from the ship, they stepped onto the island. All their supplies they brought with them. They walked through the island and Naruto didn't say it, but ever since he stepped on the land he felt strange. He felt like something called him here. So many odd voices in his head, speaking to him. He didn't know it, but his chakra was seeping into the ground, the land's natural density mixed with his chakra, evolving it and the surroundings. Each step, both Naruto and Yuzushiogakure changed. The group of Konoha survivors walked up to a hill. They stared into the empty lands for miles. Kosuke hummed. It seemed the debris from the Uzumaki clan's destruction had been cleaned away at some point. When he went there, it was still lined with numerous fallen buildings and structures. Now there were forests as far as the eye could see, a perfect and isolated island where no one else was. So this is our home? Shino asked. Naruto stepped in front of the group. He breathed in the oddly stale air. Yes, this would be their home. All the while Naruto wondered if this was the best that even they could get, what would the rest of the world turn into in the years to come? As the group stared at the island, a flash of green passed his eyes, his lips cursed upwards. Chapter 10. 2 years passed since the group of survivors made it to Yuzushio. In that time, life wasn't easy or simple, but they all managed. Before they even settled down fully, the group spent many days and nights scanning the island for threats or potential dangers. Aside from a few mutated animals that oddly seemed docile, or only aggressive to protect a territory, there weren't too many things to worry about here. In the first weeks of the group's stay on the island, Naruto directed them to a place near a river. Of course, they had to test that out as well. Naturally, the blonde volunteered as the testing dummy while Shino and Kosuke watched. He bathed in the river for at least 1 to 2 weeks. While it wasn't as clear as most rivers he'd seen, it at least had no side effects. Of course, the group erred on the side of caution. For the men and women, they stuck to the same ritual. No matter where someone went, they did it in groups. 2 would take a bath while 1 stood guard, and then the 2 would guard the last person. Granted, Naruto was kinda the exception to that, but he never strayed far from the main camp. That seemed to make everyone happy. Once the issue of available water was done, the group settled into the forests. That led to the next problem. Sleeping in sleeping bags lost its appeal after a few nights. There just weren't any stars to look at to even call it outdoor camping. So, after the first month of staying here, the group made a decision to build a house of some kind. This was where Kosuke Mariboshi revealed even more of his value. While he had never built houses, he'd been the friend of many carpenters, woodworkers, and builders. In fact, he actually built his own home. It was just one of those little things the man did in his downtime. That said, don't expect him to be building mansions or hotels. At the very least, he could make a house that wouldn't collapse on them. The first part was finding a suitable piece of land. They needed a secure location that could serve as a vantage point and remain sturdy against possible natural disasters. After all, while Uzushio had yet to develop any threats, environmental or otherwise, that didn't mean it wouldn't later. The group decided on a hilly area deep into the island. With their location decided, Ayam and Kosuke made plans for the build while Shino, Tenten, and Kurenai chopped down suitable trees. Naruto, much to the utter shock of everyone, could pick up 2 or 3 fully down logs if he channeled chakra into his arms. Don't ask Ayam why she blushed when she saw that the first time. She couldn't give you an answer. The house wasn't easy to build, and it took the group about 4 to 5 months, but they did have a house of some kind. It was no hotel, but, at this point, it was something they called their own. While they built the house, Kurenai and Kosuke came to Naruto with concerns for their food supply. While what they looked was plentiful, it would run out eventually. That got Naruto into thinking about other sources of food. Unfortunately, he had to speak with the group about the idea of eating off the land. Yes, the mutated, yet docile animals. No one was on board with the idea, understandably, and the subject only seemed like a ticking time bomb. They all put it off until one day, Ayam and Kosuke noticed a dip in the food stocks over the months. Now, Naruto had to give the group the grim reality. Either they try the food here or spend all this time surviving just to die of starvation. Tenten opted that they just use the boat to explore other lands, but Shino disagreed. At best, that would just a band-aid to the bigger issue. They would have to deal with this eventually. With that being the case, Naruto stood up as the leader again. He went out and hunted a wild chicken. The tips from survival training led him to expertly preparing the beast he killed. He heated it up over a fire, and once it was ready he took a bite. It wasn't great, but at least his stomach was filled. Another day he fished. He caught a couple of them and ate those as well. The day after that, he ate a stray pig he found. After that, he found some strange fruits in bushes and on trees. He ate those as well. Everything on the lands of Uzushio, for the next 2 weeks. If it could be eaten, then Naruto ate it. He gave the others a report on what things tasted like. Some things tasted sour, salty, sweet, or outright disgusting, but that was probably because he didn't prepare it the best. Then, everyone waited a month for the blonde to experience any side effects. Well, aside from some slightly longer hair that gave him a bit of a wild man look, which Ayam and oddly enough, Kurenai found nice to look at, there wasn't anything wrong with him. Then, Kosuke and Shino tried it. Once no side effects appeared on them after another month, the ladies tried it. It definitely took some getting used to, but that led into another act for the group, agriculture. Kurenai led Tenten and Shino in the ways of hunting and gathering. Kosuke, Naruto, and Ayam went foraging. They picked up some seeds from seed-bearing fruits. Naruto tilled the land around the house while Kosuke taught the blonde how to judge soil, weather, and planting. It was all hard work, but the expectation was worth it. Meanwhile, Kurenai, Tenten and Shino came back with about 5 to 10 captured chickens. Kosuke quickly created a pen for them. They even came back with a few mutated boars. While they definitely looked different from the usual that they'd come to know, they still seemed peaceful enough. Besides, this gave the group the chance to study some of the effects this new environment had on the animals. One thing the group noticed was that the animals tended to follow Naruto for whatever reason if they ever got out rarely. No one knew why. Once all of these things were done, then came the shinobi practices. Oh yes, the shinobi practices came all right. Kurenai and Kosuke quickly started teaching Shino, Tenten, Ayam, and Naruto everything that they could during those 2 years. Stealth training, assassination, information gathering, teamwork exercises, and jutsu control mainly for Naruto, and chakra control, mainly for Naruto. They also continued to school the four in what both knew of mathematics, geography from the maps they looted, and science. Of course, there was hardly a need for tests now, but it made everyone feel like some normalcy returned. That said, even after those 2 years, Naruto was still the only one who had chakra. Even more than that, unlike 2 years ago, now he could properly perform all 5 types of elemental jutsu with great proficiency. Sure, he wouldn't really be standing out against an Uchiha in Katan Jutsu, but for the average shinobi, he was spectacular. As for Genjutsu, Kurenai wasn't sure what to believe. The basics of Genjutsu were to use your chakra to influence the chakra flow in a person's brain, thus making them hear, see, feel, and experience things that weren't there. While Naruto couldn't create images, she just swore there was something about him that she just naturally aligned to. Whatever he said, it sounded like the greatest boom of thunder. Sometimes she felt like he really was influencing her mind, but could he even do that? Anyway, through the years, Naruto continued to refine his chakra control through more severe exercises. He mastered tree climbing and then moved on to water walking. Of course, both of these were hard to do, but never let anyone tell you that Uzumaki Naruto lacked enthusiasm. He moved on from water walking to intense physical exercises. While Kurenai observed him from the top of a steep ledge, the blonde would climb up the hillside with 2 hands before he moved on to 1 arm. As he got older and older, the Genjutsu mistress found herself staring longer and longer. That said, there were some things Naruto didn't tell the group. While the others slept, he practiced another ability he had. He could somehow connect the green chakra with other forms of life. He could connect to a flying, mutated bird and it would obey him until he retracted his chakra from it. More than that, if he tried, he could see what the bird saw. He could see the entire island if he desired. He even tried that with a couple of lone mutated wolves on the other side of the island. They turned on each other and killed themselves, which allowed his group to feast on wolf meat. Of course, they disinfected it first. So far, in the 2-year period, Naruto didn't have any blackouts since he killed that crew that invaded the boat. He also refined the green chakra. Now he could create up to 3 clones. The strain wasn't quite so heavy anymore. However, despite this wave of good fortune, the group of 6 weren't so disillusioned that they forgot the type of world they lived in. Tenten got sick one time, which worried everyone. No one was exactly an expert in medicine, but Kurenai took a few courses. She gave Tenten some medicine and after a few weeks the girl was fine. There were a few more illnesses that ran through the group, such as high fever, coughing, headaches, sore throats, and other ailments. Yet they got through them all. Of course, even with this, the world was unforgiving. Acid rain fell on top of the house and it would have brought it down had it not been for Naruto funneling green chakra through the home's exterior for an entire night. Since then, Kosuke built a more sustainable cover for the rooftop. It was good that the acid rain wasn't so heavy that it could burn through everything. A few dented spots here and there. Then the group had to contend with the island flooding. Thankfully, where they resided, it didn't flood too much. That said, the extra water was nice on the crops. There were also some water spouts that tore through the island, but there weren't many of those. Lastly, there were 1 or 2 earthquakes. All in all, though they struggled, the group of Konoha survivors did just that. They survived. Unfortunately, that led to a problem, which was why the groups surrounded each other. Ayam sighed. We're running low on some desired materials. Thanks to Kosuke's method of turning the salt water into drinking water, we don't need to worry about water, but we only have about 2 or 3 scrolls of food left aside from the farm animals. We're also running out of some toiletries. I think we'll have to go back out, Ayam said. The others glanced to each other. We're also slowly losing medicine. There are some good medicinal herbs around here, but none of us know how to properly make use of them. The workload over these years drained most of our resources, Kosuke replied. Naruto picked up a map, pushing one of his bangs from his eyes as he did so. He opened it and stared at it. We've left Fire Country in the past few years. No one else has come to this island aside from us. If we took the ship to the east, then we'd head into Kyuubigoku's territory. We don't know what the situation's like over there, but just a little bit northwest, we would meet Hot Water Country and Kyuubigo. We could also journey a little bit southwest as well. That would take us to Wave Country. If we connect to Wave, then south of that would be Tea Country, he said as he pointed to each spot. We don't know the situation brewing outside the island. All our efforts were spent stabilizing the island. Plus, we'll need to figure out who goes with Naruto. Kosuke has taught us how to use the boat. Now it's a matter of who goes and who guards the island, Kurenai said. Shino and I can stay. Besides, I've gotten good at trap work. We had plans to work on the island's perimeter anyway, Tenten said a little too enthusiastically. The others looked at the two teens. The weapons mistress coughed while the Aburame heir pushed up his glasses. Yes. Just you two, by yourselves? Ayam asked with a smile while Tenten rubbed the back of her head. The two young teens didn't think the others knew, but they weren't very good at sneaking away. It seemed a little too coincidental that Tenten asked Shino to help her check for traps, while the others went to sleep. Just a little too coincidental. No, not by ourselves. Besides, we need Kosuke-san to help with our taijutsu training. Also, we could use this time to see how Ayam-san's developed compared to us in these 2 years. Come on, you can't tell me you don't think this is a good idea, Tenten argued. The others looked at her slyly before Naruto shook his right. Right, well, Tenten does have a point. I'm not opposed to Ayam-chan and Kurenai-chan as a team with me. But you guys realize if we take the boat, you won't have another way off the island, he replied. Kosuke nodded. We can fashion a simple canoe. I imagine it'll be done before you even get back, he answered. Slowly, the Kyuubi Jinchuriki nodded and pointed to the map. Alright, then I suggest we head northwest to Hot Springs Country. There's more land to cover in that direction. We'll head out for maybe a month's trip. That should be enough to gather whatever we need before we come back here, he said. Kurenai and Ayam agreed. Alright, when will we set out? She asked. Naruto hummed. 2 days, I think, he answered. Kurenai agreed and so did Ayam. With that, everyone was dismissed. Tenten grabbed Shino's arm and dragged him out of the wooden house. The remaining 4 watched them go and shook their heads. They aren't very secretive, are they? Kosuke asked. The 4 shared a laugh before Naruto and Ayam walked out of the room, talking to each other as they did so. That left Kurenai and Kosuke alone. The smile on the Jonin's face fell. It's been 2 years, Kosuke-san. Don't you think Naruto deserves to know now? You keep this from him, and he might learn it from someone else out there. The Genjutsu mistress exclaimed. I know, the eternal genin replied somberly. Then, it's not that simple, Kurenai. Kosuke raised his voice a moment before he excused himself. He inhaled and exhaled tiredly. Think about it. How can I tell him, the young man who's always dreamed of having a family, that not only is he in his ancestral home, but it allied with Konoha, who couldn't help preventing its destruction? He said. The female Jonin opened and closed her mouth. Kosuke continued speaking. Kurenai-san, I will admit it. I like Naruto-kun. He has the makings of a great leader. He's been a guiding light in these uncertain times, but he's also very young. I've never doubted the young man's intentions, but he's got no real reason to like Konoha, especially given his earlier years. I fear this could break him if we're not careful, and what would that mean for us? He'd be well within his rights to leave us to our fate. It's probably what we deserve, he finished. He wouldn't do that, Kurenai replied defensively, which made the elderly man stiffen. I've seen his growth, his strength and his determination. Plus, I believe in him. He wouldn't do that. And if you're wrong? Kosuke asked. I'm not, she responded. To be honest, Mariboshi was immensely surprised. Never had he seen this woman defend someone so fiercely. Oh sure, he knew of her attachment to the Hyuga heiress, the late Hinata Hyuga, but he didn't remember her even defending that young girl like this. You're very protective of Naruto-kun, Kosuke said. Kurenai blinked. Looking out for his well-being? Yes, I am, but that's all there is to it. He places his trust in us every day. It shouldn't be a hard task to do the same for him. That's all, she said. Never mind that she didn't once stare into Kosuke's eyes when she said that. All right, just give me some time to think. I'll tell him when you come back from the trip, he stated. Kurenai didn't approve, but she didn't voice her opinion. Instead, she sighed and left. She only hoped Kosuke stuck to his word as she left. Meanwhile, Naruto watched Ayam throw some kunai. She nailed the center of a target with a smile on her face. When she looked back at the blonde, he nodded. He then walked over to her and stood behind her. Very good, Ayam-chan, but you're still having trouble flicking your wrist. Remember, loosen up. The kunai's not gonna turn around and fire back at you, he said as he grabbed her arm. Ayam shivered when she felt her young friend's chest on her back. In 2 years he must have had his growth spurt because he was taller than her by now. She didn't even remember when it started, but she did remember how many minutes she spent staring at him as a result. At some point, their sleep sessions turned from her cuddling him to her falling asleep on his chest. The first time that happened, both playfully laughed it off, but as the days passed it just became an almost natural thing. It felt good to them both. Well, it felt amazing for her, though she always denied it when asked. Then as the 2 years passed, Naruto only got more well put together. Ayam never mentioned it much, but she loved Naruto's bangs. She'd had a few embarrassing, yet stimulating dreams about him. Now, his body was this close to hers and his natural forest smell was utterly intoxicating. She didn't know why. When she smelled someone like Shino or Kosuke, she didn't get this feeling. The Uzumaki air just smelled so invigorating. All right, she replied. She didn't have the heart to tell Naruto she wasn't paying attention, but she tried thereafter. The two practiced throwing their kunai for some time until they felt they'd done enough. Ayam grabbed Kurenai for a quick bath while Naruto started checking on the animals. He collected some eggs from the mutated chickens. It seemed that even though this world had changed, some parts of his old world still remained. Naturally, for some reason, whenever he was around, the chickens followed him around as he collected eggs. It was odd. In the winter months, the snow hadn't done what it did back in Konoha. Of course, no one was willing to go outside to test it. That said, they did see that the chickens could oddly eat the snow. Hell, they pretty much thrived in any environment so long as there was some kind of vegetation around. Once Naruto collected the eggs, he placed them in a cold storage that his group had made. It wasn't too efficient, and it needed lots of maintenance, but at least it meant not ruined eggs and meat. Naruto locked the cage and the chickens continued on their usual business. As the blonde placed the eggs there, he stared at the scoops of snow and ice he'd shoveled inside. That was another thing he learned about his chakra. If he desired, he could pour his chakra into things like trees, snow, and even the land itself. Trees could grow much taller, snow wouldn't melt for weeks in any type of water, and the land hastened its crops. No one knew what to think of it. Anyway, he stored the eggs in the storage along with the meat products. When he closed the door and locked it, he sighed. The Kyuubi Jinchuriki didn't understand it. What was it about these lands? Ever since he got here, he felt his chakra grow in leaps and bounds. It was as if the land was naturally made for him. He asked the Kyuubi, but the fox was always silent about the topic. At some point, he just stopped asking altogether. Still, sometimes, he'd head to the highest hill and just breathe in the air. Even just doing that made it feel like his body was taking in every single piece of the island. Yuzushogaku, just what was it about the island that seemed to resonate with him so well? Naruto-kun, we're going to go check on the water by the ocean. We'll be back soon. The blonde turned and he noticed Kurenai and Ayam waving to him. The blonde stiffened when he saw some water drip off Ayam's beautiful neck and down her semi-open cleavage. Even Kurenai's looked like she washed her face a little bit, which made her hair a little wetter than normal. They were both very beautiful. He waved them goodbye and he watched them go. His eyes spent a bit longer on their forms than even he knew. The Uzumaki heir couldn't deny it. He had it bad for Ayam. He also had it very bad for Kurenai. His crush for Sakura slowly died away with the idea that she was more than likely dead. He wasn't too surprised by his attraction to Ayam. Being around her for 2 years, the two had enough embarrassing moments between themselves. However, he was surprised at his attraction to Kurenai. She was just such a mature light in a world like this. She oddly kept him grounded, always there to challenge him but defer to him when all situations called for it. It seemed they both offered him so many things and he couldn't help falling hard for them both. Maybe, ever since the start of all this shit, he'd liked them. Not counting Sasuke, he gave his first kiss to Kurenai. He'd never forgotten it. Whenever the Kyuubi Jinchuriki looked at them, he always thought he'd do anything if it meant their happiness. Yet he didn't know why. Sometimes, he felt jealous of Tenten and Shino. It must be nice to have someone like that. 3 days passed. Naruto, Ayam, and Kurenai boarded their ship while Kosuke, Tenten, and Shino watched them go. "Alright, we'll be back soon. Take care, you guys," Ayam said while the others waved. "Please return alright. In times such as these, we've only got ourselves," Kosuke said. The three nodded firmly before Naruto pulled the boat from the docks and they sailed away from the land of whirlpools. The trip was pretty uneventful. Ayam made a note that the water seemed a bit cleaner than it was when they sailed the first couple of times. They still saw a myriad of destroyed ships and wreckage that made them wonder about survivors, but they sailed on. To pass the time, Ayam and Kurenai read some books while Naruto sailed them as quietly as possible. He didn't know why, but he felt something ominous beneath the ocean. Not eager to find out what, he moved them on. By the time they reached land, it was near the evening. As they expected, a number of collapsed trees crashed against each other. Rotting wood littered the spoiled ground. Hot steam ominously rose from beneath the dirt and black grass. Naruto slowly guided the boat to a piece of land hidden by some fallen natural debris. At least if anyone came along, they wouldn't spot the ship. The steam moved with the wind, out into the ocean they just traveled from. "Put on your masks," Naruto said. Ayam and Kurenai agreed. Everyone grabbed their backpacks and stepped off the boat. Then, for the first time in 2 years, the trip stepped on land that wasn't their home. As soon as Naruto's feet touched the ground, his ears picked up on the sound of bubbling gas. Its smell was hideous. He quickly guided the two ladies away from the devastating forest area and towards higher ground. As their steps sank into the earth, they watched what looked like black tar stick to the soles of their shoes. "What is this stuff?" Ayam asked as they trudged through the ground. "I'd rather not find out," Kurenai replied as she saw the decomposed wings of some creature stuck in the ground. It was almost like the land was devouring the things around it. Naruto glanced off to the side and he saw puddles of boiling black ooze. Bubbles bloated up and popped, releasing steam into the air. Worried, he told them to keep up their pace. After some time, the trio made it to the top of a small hill and they stared down at the bubbling wasteland in front of them. Hundreds of black tar pits littered the ground. Each one of them bubbled like hot water in a large pot. Steam vents oozed out smoke and black powder like sulfur into the air. Inside one of the pits, a tree slowly sank beneath its gooey substance. Naruto knelt to the ground and picked up a small stone. He then threw it into one of the pits. The group watched it sink beneath the sizzling, boiling tar. "Let's get to some higher ground," he advised. The others agreed. They walked further up the hill and far away from what Naruto would dub the tar lands. It was good the ship was a further ways away from these lands because he wondered if they'd even make it back. The group of three continued to travel through the open land. It seemed that the 2 years away from civilization hadn't prepared them for what they had seen. The earth constantly rumbled ominously. The screeching of bird-shaped beasts sounded in the sky. The open plains of nothingness offered nowhere to hide. However, the creatures never attacked Naruto, Kurenai, and Ayam. One of them got close, but they always backed off when Naruto glared at them. It was only about half an hour into the journey that the blonde stopped his group. He exhaled and held out his hand to one of the flying creatures. The green chakra flew out like 1,000 strings before they attached themselves to the flying, four-limbed beast. Its wings flapped, and it screeched for a moment. "Naruto-kun, what are you?" Ayam stopped when Kurenai quickly silenced her. She placed a finger to her lips and observed. A shaky breath, the Kyuubi Jinchuriki connected with the creature. He could see what it saw. Its eyes were filled with red like it was in a maddened rage. Its body was a constant course of agony and suffering. The blonde decided to hurry up. He flew it over the horizon until he found what they were looking for. He disconnected from the flying beast and it flew off with another screech. Naruto opened his eyes. There's a broken-down village not too far from here. If we hurry, then I think we can make it before the sun sets, or we could just camp here and head there tomorrow. We won't have much sunlight to scan for anything if we head there now, he said. Kurenai and I.M. stared at the putrid green clouds. It was indeed going to get dark soon. The latter then stared at the circling creatures. I'd rather head to the village. It's better than having these things above us, she said. Kurenai agreed. She then took out some binoculars and stared in all directions. Plus, we're out in the open. I'd rather not be where people could spot us so easily. With that consensus, the group continued on. Heavy winds blew in their faces as they trudged through the valley of nothingness. The sweat poured down from their faces as blistering heat, arid wind, and sandy tornadoes rose in the distance. The closer and closer they got to the village, the more destroyed buildings they saw. What seemed like an outpost at one point had been crushed into the dirt. Some type of moss had begun growing on it. It seems the earth is taking back its home from the humans, I.M. said through her mask when they passed by another shop that had some vines growing on it. When they saw the shop, they all stopped. It wasn't too out of the way, and it still seemed to stand for the moment. Naruto sliced off some vines and guided the two ladies inside. The shop creaked. As they stepped inside, they noticed a few blade marks on the walls. The three also noticed some bunched-up blankets. Someone stayed here previously. After a quick inspection of the shop, the group settled down to dinner on one of the upper floors. The atmosphere was rather cold, and they needed some extra blankets. Once they were settled, they sipped some hot cans of soup. The three were relatively quiet except for the sounds of their spoons knocking against their cans. Someone was here, Kurenai said, breaking the silence. Naruto slowly nodded. I.M. did as well. It was something they all had been considering but hadn't brought it out until now. Yeah, shouldn't that be a good thing? It means we could actually find others, the former ramen waitress said. Remember, I.M., we've been in isolation for almost 2 years. We don't know how the world's changed, much less the mindset of people. There's no guarantee that whoever we meet will be friendly. Don't forget what happened last time, the former Jonin replied. The brown-haired woman agreed. I remember. I just think it's comforting that we're not the only ones who survived. At least we're not the last humans in existence. She chuckled nervously. Naruto munched on his can of soup and potatoes as he heard his friends talk. He grabbed one of the curtains and moved it to the side. He saw nothing over the horizon. All he saw were miles and miles of sand dunes and broken trees. We'll have to rotate the sleeping schedule. We're staying where someone else stayed, Databeo. This could be a trap for roaming survivors, he stated. Agreed. I suggest we work in 2-hour intervals. I'll take the first, I am the second, and then Naruto the last. Once it's Naruto's time to go to sleep, he can create a clone that will cover the last 2 hours. What do you think? Kurenai asked. Naruto nodded. Yeah, that sounds fine, he replied. Once their plans were made, the group spent some time taking a brief bath. That said, it was clear that their usual way of taking a bath wouldn't work in a conventional manner. So they all made a compromise. Naruto and Kurenai would guard I.M. while she bathed and so on. Kurenai and I.M. would guard Naruto while he did the same. Of course, the girls warned him against perverse actions, even though he'd basically seen both naked. Well, one more than the other, but the point still stood. That said, he shocked them when he told them the consequences if they peeked also. When they asked, he chuckled. Please, you didn't think men were the only ones who peeked in the hot springs, did you? Both girls widened their eyes while Naruto laughed. Yeah, you learn a lot of shit when you were working as a bath scrubber. Say, for instance, you learned about the hidden hole most of the men didn't know about that some more adventures ladies used. If you were wondering why Naruto never covered up that hole, well, he was paid not to. Who knew hot springs were a sleazy business? Naturally, Kurenai and I.M. stared at each other in utter shock while Naruto laughed. For the former's sake, the blonde wouldn't talk about a certain snake-themed friend of hers using that woman's spot. Anyway, the women bathed and then Naruto bathed. All of it was done in one room and with the jugs of water that they had stored. Once that respite was done, they spent some of their time leisurely in the world of books. Really, Naruto wondered how many books he'd read over these 2 years. Did magazines even count? If he looked at one more shampoo product, he thought he'd go insane. Some hours passed by. Kurenai watched as Naruto and I.M. fell asleep. Well, more specifically, she watched the way I.M. leaned her head on Naruto's shoulder, his arm around her shoulders. The former Jonin wanted to think this was done unconsciously, but she thought it must have been nice to be held like that. The Genjutsu mistress sighed before she stared out into the wasteland that was the elemental nations until it was time for her and I.M. to switch. The switch was done and I.M. watched Kurenai enter her own sleeping bag. While I.M. looked outside, she chuckled when she saw Kurenai slowly roll out of her own sleeping bag. The Genjutsu mistress, whether consciously or unconsciously, rolled into the blonde's embrace. His hand wrapped around her, and her head rested on his chest. If the red-eyed woman wasn't sleeping, then the brown-haired young woman would have been sure this was on purpose. That said, I.M. did feel a little jealous. However, she was surprised she wasn't as jealous as she might have been. She didn't know why, but something inside her didn't fault this sight. She didn't know why. She'd had 1 or 2 boyfriends. She never thought of sharing them with anyone, but then again, Naruto was a little different. What am I even talking about? Naruto-kun and I aren't even dating. Why should I care who he sleeps with? I.M. thought to herself. She sighed as she checked the traps around the shop. She hoped to keep herself busy as she did so, but she never moved far from her 2 sleeping friends. Soon her 2 hours were up and she woke up Naruto. The older teen yawned and stretched himself. His eyes widened when he saw Kurenai in his bed. He had no idea how she got there, and his embarrassment became amusement for I.M. He slipped out without waking up the Jonin and took his post while I.M. fell back asleep. Please don't think less of Naruto when he saw 2 beautiful women sleeping together as close as these 2 were. However, as he observed them, his eyes softened. They really were beautiful women. I.M., Kurenai, being in such close proximity to them, he often found some times to go away and be by himself. He couldn't count how many times he thought of them when he was alone. He felt bad about it the first few times. More, he felt conflicted. He always thought he'd only have these thoughts about Sakura. Yet again, there was just something I.M. and Kurenai had that Sakura didn't. Sure, they had a few years over her, but it was that same thing that made them so attractive to him. To him, Sakura was cute. I.M. and Kurenai were beautiful. There was just no doubt that they were women. They used a radiant beauty that he never truly looked at before. He started to understand what Erosenin said about the sexiness and curves of a woman. Now, he didn't approve of the man's methods, but he began to understand why he might do it. Naruto can't say he wasn't tempted. Though he felt bad, he couldn't help himself. Rather, it seemed like his body was urging him to view them both as what they were: beautiful, strong, and worthy women. However, worthy of what? For the next 2 hours, Naruto stared out into the vast nothingness. Only his thoughts kept him company, and those led him to daydreaming. What would a life with those 2 be like if he were older? 2 hours passed by and Naruto created a clone. He looked at the spot where Kurenai and I.M. laid. Well, it was pretty clear he wasn't going to get back in that sleeping bag. So, with that being the case, Naruto took Kurenai's and fell asleep. More time passed. Naruto was awoken by his clone. It dispelled and leaned up. He rubbed his head as he stared out the window. The light of the putrid world entered through their windows. He unzipped the sleeping bag and unpacked some food. When his friend woke up, they all ate their breakfast. I.M. kept giggling, which caused Kurenai to look at her. Naruto shook his head. He knew what she was laughing about. None of this was good for his heart. Once their breakfast was done, they packed up their things. They then walked out of the torn-down shop. For once, it wasn't windy. It'd be a good day for travel. They picked up their backpacks and finally headed back into the blistering heat. While the trio trudged through the sandy plains, they quickly erred on the side of caution. While the embarrassing night was behind them, they still thought about the possibility of other survivor groups. After all, Naruto killed one of them. 3 or 4 extra hours passed, and finally, the group gasped as they saw the broken walls of KyuubiGoku. Kurenai's face fell. She didn't know what she was expecting, but this wasn't it. She'd been to the village before. Sure, it wasn't a typical shinobi village. Some called it the village that has forgotten wars due to its nature for pacifism. The village moved away from shinobi traditions and into tourism. While peace was nice, the Jonin could never understand such pacifism that you'd willingly ignore the suffering around you. She didn't approve. That said, KyuubiGoku was, as the name suggested, known for its hot springs. Sometimes the steam from the hot springs could move through the very air of the village. It gave off a very serene feeling. Well, if she had to say, then at least most of the village was still standing. The trio stared down at KyuubiGoku. To be honest, it looked much better than Konoha did. There were a lot of crushed buildings, fallen debris, and a shadow of death upon it, but at least they could see some semblance of broken roads and walkways. Apparently, the disasters hadn't shaken the village so much that it fell to its knees. Naruto pulled out his binoculars and surveyed the village, or what was left of it. Kurenai frowned. "You're searching for that group that might have stayed back in that shop?" she asked the Kyuubi Jinchuriki. Naruto nodded. "Yeah. If we made it here, it's possible they did too. I might ask you two to stay behind just in case," Naruto replied. "Why's that?" Ayam asked. "We don't know if I'm the only one who can use chakra, Databeo. I'm not putting the two of you in harm's way on a mistake. In fact, I'll send out a clone. These were made for information gathering after all," he stated. He missed the blush on the faces of both ladies at this sincerity. "Good idea," Kurenai answered. So Naruto created the clone and transformed it into a middle-aged man. He sent it down into the village. He then closed his eyes and exhaled. The green chakra flashed through his eyes and connected with the chakra of his clone. He then closed his eyes and concentrated. It wasn't long before he could see exactly what his clone saw. Ayam and Kurenai decided to busy themselves by watching for any kind of activity. The broken-down village was silent, almost nervously so. Neither woman knew why they felt anxious. The village looked better than Konoha did. Yet, that offered a feeling of uncertainty and tenseness that they didn't like. It was only when they saw Naruto gasp, his eyes wide, did they know their feelings were justified. They saw Naruto glare down at the village hidden in hot water. "The clone was forcibly dispelled," he said, which made both shudder. They looked back down at the quiet village, its roads filled with sand and some overgrown shrubbery. Naruto, Kurenai, and Ayam slid back down the sand hill and reconvened. "Monsters?" Ayam asked. Naruto slowly shook his head. "It came from behind. I intentionally lowered the clone's guard to make it more believable. The clone got pounced on and then stabbed. Whatever's down there, it's organized." The two females looked at each other. The Genjutsu mistress frowned. "It's possible it was those people who stayed in the shop prior," she suggested. "Or they were killed by the people in the village. Either way, they're hostile. We could look somewhere else," Ayam said, but Kurenai was the one to shake her head. "I wouldn't advise it. We always knew this was going to happen eventually. If we keep this passive stance, then it's not going to be long before we run out of stuff. Whether Naruto let the clone's guard down or not, it's clear that if he had gone, then they would have attacked. Also, if these are people, then they know someone's ability to use jutsu. The only positive we've got is that they don't know what we look like," she answered back. Naruto sighed. "All right, look. It's obvious we're the intruders here, but we need things, Databeo. They've got one chance. If they stay out of our way, then we'll stay out of their way. However, if they attack us, then I'm not gonna hesitate," the blonde said with a merciless glare. Ayam and Kurenai agreed. Yes, this wasn't their normal world. There were new rules in this one, and the number one was to survive. Kurenai stared over the hill. "Where did you get attacked?" she asked. Naruto stared over the hill again. "Around the northeast. So, then we'll stay to the southwest," he said. The two ladies agreed. They grabbed their kunai sets and slowly walked over the hill. They slid down the sand dunes. If there was one thing Naruto didn't like about this, then it was the fact that they were so open. It would have been obvious for anyone to see that they were entering. That said, it wasn't like his group has no information to work with. He channeled the green chakra into his eyes and he stared into the village. He could see any spot of the village very well. It was because of that, he could see the tiniest outlines of green chakra to the northeast of the village, about 5 of them to be exact. They definitely weren't creatures. The chakra was too small. Oddly enough, it was much smaller than Kurenai and Iam's. He had no idea why. Either way, the trio slowly appeared by the southern side of the village. Iam chuckled. When was the last time she even saw a standing building that wasn't the home that Kosuke made for them? Granted, could she even call these standing? It seemed like these builds were one good earthquake from being knocked over. Naruto wordlessly motioned for Iam and Kurenai to move into the village. They did so. If there was one thing the former ramen shop worker was proud of, it was her stealth training. Her steps barely made a sound on the ground of sand and crushed pebbles. Same for the former jonin. They all entered as quietly as they could. The 3 walked up to a house. While Kurenai and Iam went inside, the blonde teen kept guard. It didn't take them very long before they returned. They only came out with a couple of things. A few torn towels, 1 box of paper towels, and a case of toilet paper. It's been looted already. The older woman signed to her friends. The younger one nodded. Yeah, this looks like some leftover stuff that someone didn't get to collect. If people have been here for 2 years, it'd give them enough time to loot the area. Iam signed back. The Kyuubi Jinchuriki narrowed his eyes as he turned back to the cornucopia of death and destruction that was the lands of hot water country. He glanced back to the northeast. He only saw 2 people now. The other 3 had begun moving through the eastern quadrant of the village. He frowned. Let's keep moving, he said. He sealed what they had in a scroll and they continued on. The 3 moved through the village and it became quite apparent that they indeed weren't alone. For the first time, they spotted traps that weren't their own. They were professionally made. Whoever they were dealing with, it wasn't a civilian. That said, they dodged the traps fairly easily. Some were double-layered, but it wasn't too much work to deactivate them. Plus, they could take them if they wished. They were interesting materials. As the trio worked through the southwest side, they quickly came to realize just how much Yugakure turned into a tourist village. There were many things not exactly related to survival. Too many shops for trinkets and other worthless shit littered the village. Granted, it was no surprise why, but it was a little frustrating. Well, it was better than nothing. They looted a few areas for food, but they noticed a few caved-in areas that just couldn't be explored. While they searched, Naruto continued to monitor those on the other side of the village. They kept getting closer. Slowly, but surely they came closer. He signaled his 2 friends. They both nodded as they continued to work. They grabbed some cans of food that had been left. They also looked through the cabinets. Most were empty, but there still seemed to be the occasional snack laying around. It did make them wonder why it wasn't being taken, but they weren't about to complain. Iam spent some time grabbing some more books. Without much in the way of media entertainment, books were probably the best they were all going to get until forever. Kurenai found some storage rooms with more cleaning supplies. At worst, they could use these broken brooms and mops as fishing rods. Naruto pulled out the list of things that they needed. They hadn't gotten nearly enough food. They also needed some luxury items. Shampoo, body wash, hell, maybe even soap at this point. Maybe even some baking soda and toothpaste as well. At least, they didn't really need to worry about other things. There was also a need for some of Tenten's blacksmith stuff. She'd finally gotten to reading through all the shit on the craft. She started making small weapons and that made her more confident to produce other things. Of course, she didn't know too much about their applicability, but better to test than not. She asked for a few things that would help her create a firmer foundation, but she didn't expect too much. An hour or 2 of pure work passed. 2 scrolls were filled up with supplies. They'd moved through about 8 to 10 buildings before they finally decided to take a break. Unfortunately, their break couldn't last before Naruto scowled. Kurenai and Iam shivered when they heard footsteps on the floor above them. Yes, I'm checking one more building. Haven't spotted anything just yet. Hi, I understand, Hi, understood. They heard someone speak from on top of the roof. The older blonde heard the slide of a window open as steps moved inside. Kurenai and I am moved to the opposite sides of the door. However, they all heard something metallic fall down one of the stairs. Soon the rooms above and below began to get filled up with black smoke. Kurenai, Naruto, and I am quickly grabbed their gas masks and placed them on. After the smoke bomb, the tourist shop they were in became hard to see. Thankfully, the blonde could spot everyone through his use of the green chakra. He signaled to his friends as he stuck to the ceiling. They each grabbed their kunai. The steps got closer and closer. Pretty soon the steps were mere feet away from the group. It was then that Naruto chose the time to attack. He dropped down. The person gasped before the blonde pushed the green chakra into his body. So strong was its pressure that it cracked the floorboards beneath his feet. He then charged the intruder. Worth his strength, he grabbed the person and slammed them into the other side of the wall. The person coughed violently. They tried to struggle against Naruto, but his strength was easily superior to their own. That said, the blonde noticed the person was using some type of large weapon. Unfortunately, they couldn't gather much strength before he pinned them to the ground and placed a kunai to their throat. "Don't move!" Naruto said as Kurenai and Ayam came in. They were ready to subdue the intruder as well, but nothing could have prepared the trio when the Kyuubi Jinchuriki felt his prisoner's chakra flare. "Suetun, Suijin Hiki, water release, water formation wall," the person shouted. The person inhaled and time seemed to slow down for Naruto. He didn't ask why someone besides him could use a jutsu. He didn't ask why someone other than him could weaponize the green chakra. He wanted to, but his mind moved like it was on autopilot. He freed the prisoner and ran for Kurenai and Ayam. He grabbed them as a blast of water expelled from the person's lips through a mouth hole with insane force. The water crashed into his body and spiraled into a massive defensive wall that crashed through the ceiling of the shop. The three were launched outside. Naruto covered them both as they ragdolled across the ground. They finally slid through the sand and into the wall of another shop. His mind rattled. Naruto groaned as he searched for Kurenai and Ayam. Both were next to him. They were a little roughed up, but they were alive. The two opened their eyes and gasped as they saw the shop they were just in crumble to the ground. The two women were stunned. Someone else could use jutsu aside from Naruto? Sure, they always considered the possibility, but seeing it was a whole other matter. Naruto quickly got to his feet. He noticed the water wall dispel away as the person he had subdued only moments jump on top of another shop. Now, the blonde got a good look at the person. For one, it was a boy about his age. He was a bit short, but he had blue hair on his head. He also wore some cracked, squared glasses on his face. However, more than that, Naruto noticed the boy had shark-like teeth, not unlike Zabuza back on his wave mission. Tied to his back was some type of bladed weapon wrapped in bandages. "Identify yourselves or be destroyed. I'd recommend not resisting. As you can see, I can still use chakra," he claimed. Naruto's eyes narrowed. He pushed some green chakra into his mind to make him think faster. First and foremost, he had to protect Kurenai and Ayam. While he didn't doubt their progress, he didn't know how they would deal with a person who could use jutsu. Then, there was that explosion. This guy's group was making their way over here with haste. "Ayam-chan, Kurenai, you both should get out of here, Databayo. More are coming," he said. "And leave you here?" Ayam asked. How could Naruto even suggest such a thing? "Even if we run, Naruto, it's possible they will follow us. Sorry, Naruto, but we assumed this would happen. There aren't many places to hide in the desert. We'd just be running until we're exhausted. If they can use chakra, then I doubt we'll be able to escape," Kurenai replied. The former genin cursed. All of those were valid reasons. He then snarled. "Fine. You guys back me up then," he said as the green chakra in his body flared up. He inhaled and exhaled. "You with me, Kyuubi? Need you ask, brat? Eliminate this piece of shit." The Kyuubi growled as the fox funneled red chakra through the blonde's chakra network. Green and red, both energies rushed through Naruto's body as he stared up at the young teen in front of him. While the guy might be able to use jutsu, Naruto would show him what a real jutsu looked like. Futon de Tapa, wind release, great breakthrough. Naruto called out as he inhaled and stunned I am, Kurenai, the teen on the roof, and anyone who might have been close. He blew a blast of wind from his lips with such power that it tore through the buildings, shops, and homes. Like the force of a minor tornado, the boy on the rooftops gasped. He has chakra too! I am possible! He exclaimed in thought before the ground beneath his feet. He tried to channel chakra to his feet to remain on balance, but it wasn't long before he was flung through the air. He screamed as the wind jutsu blasted through a quarter of Yudikure. So violent was the gale that the very arid area spun with it, creating a desert tornado of circulating destruction. Kurenai was stunned. That was a C-rank jutsu used like an S-rank. When they were training over the 2 years, she'd never seen something like that. When she looked at Naruto, she blushed. That strength, why was that so oddly attractive? Soon, just as Naruto assumed, it wasn't long before the boys' group arrived. Chojuro, are you all right? One of the others asked. Another distinguished himself among the group. He was a lot older. Hell, he looked to be in his mid-40s. Some type of bandage appeared over his right eye. The one named Chojuro coughed. Ao-san, he can use chakra, the blue-haired boy said, which stunned the group. They stared back at their attackers. The older man in oddly ragged clothing glared. So, they have someone similar to Raiga-san and Ranmura-sama. It should have been expected when that man we attacked turned out to be a clone. Yet, how could he create a jutsu so terrifying? The man named Ao said in wonder. When was the last time he'd seen such a ferocious jutsu? Probably before all the elemental nations fell to ruin, especially Kirigakure. Ao shook his head and held up a hand sign. My chakra is soon to run out. I'll need Ranmura-sama to grant me more. However, I should be able to at least. The older man thought as he fueled chakra into his right eye. Byakugan! He thought as he stared through the blistering, sandy air and violent storms. To say he was utterly impressed was an understatement. Such environmental changes from one jutsu. What kind of monster were they facing? When Ao stared at the group, he widened his eyes. For the man, a wave of unbridled fear pushed through his eyes. Sweat fell down his face. He fell to his knees. The fight, nay the very spirit of resistance fell from his body. Ao-san? Ao-san! What's wrong? He thought he heard someone say to him. He couldn't remember. WWE can't win. He trembled as his knees dug into the hills of sand on the ground. With the Byakugan behind his patched eye, he stared at the raging inferno of green energy flowing like a blazing inferno around the boy with sun-kissed hair. The green chakra, he'd seen it before. Lord Ranmura had it, but this was so much stronger. It was like a giant roaring divine beast staring down upon the pathetic mortal beneath its gaze. Ao-san, what do you mean? Someone else asked with a shudder. Yeah, that was the question. What did the older man even mean? He didn't know for sure. He just knew that when he stared at that young man something primal within him was pushed down. Was it fear? He wasn't sure. "Drop your weapons!" Ao said as he clawed at the sand on the ground. They needed Raiga and Ranmura to fight this. Maybe some good would come from this, but in this wasteland there were predators and beasts the average shinobi couldn't handle. This boy seemed to be a rising prince, just waiting to take his throne. This boy must die. He's a threat to Ranmura-sama's rule. He must be killed, Ao thought to himself. For now, how could they placate a beast that they'd angered? That's it for part 5. Thank you for watching and see you in the next video.